All right. Good evening, everyone. To our first Community Engagement and Outreach Committee meeting. I'm Deanna Chow, and I feel like saying for the host of the meeting, at least for the first part, and then we'll go through it and we'll select a formal chair later this evening. But I'm excited to see all of our members here today, and we're going to do a quick check to see if Calvin, maybe if you are able to look to see if we have our two other members here, but glad to see you here. And I know we have members in the public out there who are also attending, so thank you for joining us. So we'll go ahead and get started. We do have a quorum, so we'll just call to order 6-7, and we'll go through roll call. So I'll just go through your name, and then if you could just say here or present, that would be great. So Vicky Robledo.
Here.
Yadira DeSiena.
Here.
Dan McMahon.
Here.
Leslie Feldman.
Here.
Nehezi Alarvia.
Nehezi Alarvia, yes.
Great, thank you. Aaron Spalding.
Here.
Max Fennell.
Fennell, and I'm
Fennell.
here. Yep.
Great. Carol Marshall Mayer. Hi, Carol. Welcome. I think you're on mute, but I see you.
I said, actually, my name is Carol Mayer Marshall. It got backwards, but that's okay. Hello, everybody.
Okay. Thank you. We'll correct that. Mihao Bortnick.
Here.
Rich Klein.
Here.
Thanks. Sudie Johnson.
Here.
And Tiffany Dow. Okay, not present. All right. So I think first we'll just, a little bit of housekeeping. Our city clerk, I think, has a brief announcement about the meeting protocols for this evening, and then we'll go into public comment following that.
Thank you, Deanna. And again, echoing a welcome to our first CEOC meeting. At this time, we do ask that all members of the committee remain on screen, engaging your own webcams and microphones for the duration of the meeting. For any member of the public who wishes to speak on an item, after that item is called for public comment, please engage that hand feature in the bottom of your screen. If you're calling in from a landline or a cell phone, you can also press *9 to engage that hand feature. And that does conclude my brief introductions. Thank you.
Thanks, Judy. All right, so we'll go to public comment. So the public may address the Housing Element Community Engagement and Outreach Committee on any subject not listed on the agenda. Each speaker can make a public comment for a limit of 3 minutes. The CEOC cannot act on items not listed on the agenda other than to provide general information. So if there are any members of the public who would like to speak under public comment, if you could raise your hand, there is a raise your hand button at the bottom of your screen. If you just click on that, we can go ahead and unmute you. So these are for public comments not listed on this evening's agenda. We'll just give a brief moment for any members of the public.
And just to know, if you are joining us this evening by phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9.
Thanks, Calvin. Okay. Seeing no public comment, we'll go right ahead into welcome and introductions. So again, a warm welcome to all of you for taking time to be part of our Community Engagement and Outreach Committee. I think this is an exciting time to be involved in kind of a once in a decade opportunity to work on the housing element, our safety element, and the preparation of a new environmental justice element. I know this is the first time for many of us meeting, so I thought we'd take a few minutes just to go ahead and introduce ourselves to other members on the committee and to our project team. I will go ahead and get started. I'm Deanna Chow. I am the Assistant Community Development Director for the City of Menlo Park. I've been with the city 16 years, almost 16 years now, I think. This is my third housing element with the city, and I'm excited to be part of this effort as well. So I will move on to, we'll go city staff first, and then we can move to M group, and then we'll go through with our CEOC members. So.
And Deanna, I don't mean to
Yes.
interrupt, but I'm just going to
Sure.
stop sharing for a minute so everybody can see each other.
Thanks. It makes for a big discussion. I was like, people are on. Okay, so why don't we just go ahead and Cal on?
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Kelvin Chan. I'm a senior planner with the Community Development Department. I've just recently joined the City of Menlo Park. I've been here about a month. I'm very happy to be part of the team and look forward to working with you all.
Thanks, Cal. And then why don't we go with Jeff?
Thanks, Deanna. This is Jeff Bradley. I'm a principal with M Group, Metropolitan Planning Group. We're a 15-year-old city planning consulting firm based in Campbell with offices in Santa Rosa and Hayward. We work exclusively with Bay Area cities and counties on projects like this, and we're happy to reach this important milestone with this project, and we look forward to working with you all very closely. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to keep it going. So good evening, everyone. I'm Christina Paul. I'm also with M Group. I'm a planner, and I'm going to be helping out specifically on the community engagement for this project. Sung?
Sung Kwan, Principal Planner with M Group. I'm the Assistant Project Manager for this project.
Great. And I know here this evening with us, we also have Clay Curtin, our Public Engagement Manager, and you met Judy Heron, our City Clerk, earlier this evening as well. So why don't I just go around? I'm going to go around my screen here just for ease. I'll start with Sudi's first, and then we'll go to Max.
So I'm Sudi Tronsen. I'm a new member. I was a chair and vice chair for the Finance and Audit Committee in the past. I took about 1.5 years off of civic duties, and so I applied for this one. I run an intellectual property firm and a medical device startup here in right here in our neighborhood. And I'm very happy to be here.
Great, Sudi. And I know maybe if you could maybe just say a quick word about what brought you here to the CEOC. And I know there was interest in maybe earlier we were having conversations about what district you live in. Maybe if you're willing to share that.
I live in District 4, and my reason is not because I had extra time on my hand, but I really believe in civic duty for all of us, and especially when it comes to equity. And I think housing is a big, huge equity problem in not just in Menlo Park, but all of California. But what I can do is hopefully impact it for Menlo Park.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Sudi. All right, Max, and then we'll go to Aaron.
Hey everyone, my name is Max Fennell. I've lived in the area for about 5 years now. I'm a local entrepreneur. I have a coffee company, and what brought me to this is being a long-term renter. I know what it's like experiencing the pains of renting in Menlo Park, and I want to be a voice for those of us that are in my situation. And I think I have a lot of ideas to bring to the table, and just want to be involved with the city.
Great, thanks, welcome. Aaron, and then Leslie.
Hi, my name is Aaron Spalding. I live and work in District 3 in Menlo Park. I've worked here for a little over 15 years and lived here for about 10 years. And I figure I've been here long enough that I should take advantage of the opportunity here that to become more involved with Menlo Park. And I think that this also overlaps nicely with my interest in urban planning and city planning in general. It's already been mentioned that this is an important issue in terms of equity. I think it's also an important issue in terms of what Menlo Park could do for climate change, and housing and transportation are some of the leading areas that can impact climate change that we actually can have some control over. So I thank you for this opportunity.
Right, Leslie, and then Dan.
Hi, I'm Leslie Feldman. I live in District 2, the Flood Triangle neighborhood. I've lived here for just over 2 years, so I'm a relatively new resident, but I'm very interested in getting involved. Professionally, I work in the environmental policy space, but all my work has been at the national or international level, so I'm really excited to really get involved at the local level because, like Erin was saying, so many important decisions are made at this level. And I'm particularly here, I'm a mom with 2 young children, and so I don't have a ton of free time, but I think this is such an important thing, and I want to contribute to making this community more equitable for them growing up.
Thank you, welcome. And then Dan, and then followed by Michal.
Hi, I'm Dan McMahon, and I discovered looking at the list of participants in this committee, I've lived here a long time, 27 years. And lots of things have changed. But what came to mind for me was, gosh, 27 years, time to participate in helping shape how Menlo Park is going to adapt and change itself into the future. And specifically, I work on a startup called 20 Doors. We're about unlocking doors for people, quite literally. And I spent the last couple of years studying rental issues, many rental issues. So I heard someone mention, I think, Max renting and those issues. Something I take great interest in. I look forward to contributing to the city as a whole.
Great, Michal, followed by Rich.
Hi everyone, my name is Michal Bortnik. I'm a newbie. I've been here for 3 months and I fell in love already. But at the same time, I looked at some things and just was kind of heartbroken to see how segregated in such a small community neighborhoods can be, and how different the schools can be for different parts of small town. And so I'm here out of that heartbreak.
Great, well, welcome to Menlo Park. So Rich, followed by Yadira.
Hi, I'm Rich Klein, and I've served on city council in the past for 12 years. And I watched, I think I was part of the first housing element, and then the second I wasn't actually contributing, but I think in what motivates me is that it's the same problems, and they were just recycling some of this. And I think there's solutions that exist, and I just think getting new ideas and kind of fresh thinking from the community and putting in time to try to reassess some of these things on where we can apply more density and incentivize so that we can get affordable housing on the west side and other parts of the town. I think that's what I wanted to do when I started, and still want to do it, and it's obviously a lot harder than I ever thought. So I'm just happy to be a part of it.
Thanks, nice to see you again. And Yadira, followed by Carol.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yadira Di Siena. I have been a renter for about 3 years here in Menlo Park, and now I'm a homeowner going into 5 years. I actually started off as a home visitor in the Belhaven area, fell in love with Belhaven, and bought my home here. I have a background in home visiting as well as in school settings here in East Palo Alto and Belhaven. So I joined because I was able to witness and get a lot of testimony from our community about the scarcity of just proper housing, from having a water heater that works, that functions, to a sustainable living condition as far as rent goes as well. I'm hoping that I can be an advocate for the population in my community that is scared to speak. And I'm hoping that I can represent them in a way that is also respectful to what they're living and help, them get a voice. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Carol, then Vicky.
Carol?
So Carol on the lower
And yes,
left.
sorry. I'm Carol Mayer Marshall, and I live in District 4, lived here for 25 years now. I have a background in community participation. I helped write housing. I worked on Capitol Hill for many years, and I helped write a housing act that had provisions in it for community participation. And I also helped write and also direct the Community Development Corporation legislation across the country. So as Rich Klein said, I've had experience in this area, and I know it's a lot easier to say than to do, but I'm eager to do it at the local level. Since I'm retired, I retired as head of the San Francisco Mint. I made your money for you. And I have spent most of my time on women's rights. Recently founded an organization called Wire for Women, which attempts to, and in fact does, recruit and elect and appoint women in San Mateo County and Santa Clara County. And so I'm very eager to work with all of you because I can see what a diverse background we all have. It will be very interesting.
Great, Vicky, followed by Nikki.
Hi, I'm Vicky Robledo. I am born and raised in the Bay Area. I was fortunate to buy a home in my beloved community of Bellhaven. And one of my main reasons for wanting to be on this commission was to attempt to be a representative of my community. I can't speak on behalf, but I can definitely conduct outreach. My background is working in affordable housing, housing the displaced, from those in the Tenderloin to those in San Mateo County specifically. I just feel that historically, Bellhaven's voice has been neglected, and I see East Palo Alto as somewhat an ally with us. And I think these communities have historically been overlooked and not represented as much as they should and can be. So I'm excited to work on this robust outreach and to work towards not continuing to have segregated living spaces throughout Menlo Park.
Great, thank you so much. And then Nikki. Bye.
Are you saying Nahizi?
Nahizi, yes.
Hi, I'm Nahizi Alavia. My background is social work. I also have a background in oppression. That's supposed to be a joke, but it's really not.
It's real.
Yeah. My interest to this committee is because I feel like as a Black person, we have just been forgotten in Menlo Park. I live in the Willows. I feel incredibly disheartened by the systematic racism. I've only been here a year and a half, and it's really sad. I mean, we've been bullied. We've been treated poorly by non-Black folks. And it just, I guess this is my last ditch effort of like optimism for this community, just to be honest, because it just feels like I'm just working off of fumes.
Well, thank you, Nahizi, for joining us on this committee. And thank you, everyone, again. I look forward to working with each and every one of you. And I think, I'm glad you're here. We can make a difference. I think, I won't go on my planner speech, but, I think that's why I love, planner so much. So we'll move on to our next item, which is committee training, roles and responsibilities, and ground rules. And the first part, our city clerk, Judy Heron, will do a brief training for us.
Thank you, Deanna. And just by nodding, confirming everyone can see my screen. Awesome, thank you. So again, hello and welcome everybody. As I've stated, I'm Judy Heron, I'm the city clerk from Menlo Park. And on behalf of Menlo Park City Council, city manager, and city staff, we want to thank you for your dedication to serve on the Community Engagement and Outreach Committee. As a city council appointed citizen member, you are considered a public official serving in an advisory capacity to the city council, performing a valuable service by addressing the needs of your community. The City Council is looking forward to your contribution as we work together to provide efficient municipal service that is responsive to the local needs of the community. We appreciate your willingness to work in this capacity and hope that your experience is stimulating, enjoyable, and satisfying. So today, I will be providing a brief overview on the Brown Act, public meeting rules, and Robert's Rules of Order. This is kind of a condensed version of the training video link that I had sent to you all earlier today. At the end of each of these 3 sections, I'll go ahead and pause to see if you guys have any questions. So we'll start with the Brown Act. And the basis of the Brown Act is that all legislative bodies, such as City Council or an advisory body, these meetings are to be open to the public, unless explicitly stated in the Brown Act. I will be providing examples of those that are exempt from the Brown Act in a few slides. So you'll see throughout this presentation, whether I'm talking about agendas or meetings or rules of order, that the thread that ties this all together is openness. It's the people's business, and the people have the right to participate and the right to the information that is presented to all advisory bodies and City Council. So what is a legislative body? The Brown Act, it applies to all elected bodies, such as City Council, and appointed bodies, such as advisory bodies. Menlo Park has 8 appointed bodies that the Brown Act does apply to. That includes the CEOC, which is this group, the Complete Streets Commission, the Environmental Quality Commission, the Finance and Audit Committee, the Housing Commission, Library Commission, Parks and Recreation Commission, and lastly, the Planning Commission. Now, the Brown Act does not apply to temporary ad hoc committees or subcommittees, and those all would have to be made up of less than a quorum of the body and have a single purpose or a limited purpose. And then once that purpose has been served, it would be dissolved. So what is a meeting? It's a gathering of a majority of an advisory body that discusses, hears, or takes action on city business. This does include retreats, study sessions, and workshops. So if a quorum of an advisory body is meeting with the intent to discuss city business, that would be considered a meeting and must be open and available to the public. So the Brown Act applies to regular and special meetings, and it also applies to communications. And in this digital age, we need to be cognizant of the communication we do virtually with members on advisory bodies. For instance, if you wanted to send information to all the members of the advisory body, you couldn't do that via email to the entire group. That would be a violation of the Brown Act, because all members of the body or a quorum of the body are deliberating or discussing city business. You could, however, send that information to your staff liaison, who's Miss Deanna Chow, and she can distribute that to the group. So any information that you want the entire group to see, you do have a way to do that. But again, you don't want to do it in violation of the Brown Act, because we want to make sure that the public is also given notice of what's being discussed. And so the Brown Act, it does not apply to conferences, community meetings, or social or ceremonial events. That is also understanding that city business will not be discussed, will not be deliberated on, no actions are taken at any of those types of meetings or types of gatherings. So a serial meeting is considered a violation of the Brown Act, and it is a series of private meetings by which a majority of the members of an advisory body commit to a decision or engage in a collective deliberation concerning city business. And it doesn't allow for open meetings to the public. Serial meetings deprive the public of the opportunity for meaningful observation and participation. Secondarily, there is the hub and spoke, which is also a Brown Act violation. And that's where, say, one member contacts a second member, a third member, a fourth member, up until a quorum has been reached. And again, this is when they're discussing anything related to the city or city business. So again, you do want to be careful with like social media, just being mindful that any opinions that you're posting, you make it clear that it's yours and it's not a collaborative decision of your committee. Finally, there is what they call the daisy chain. And this is where, one member contacts, or in this example, member A contacts member B, and then member B contacts a third member C, and so on. Again, discussing something that is city related. And a lot of these happen kind of inadvertently. So we just, again, want to be very sure that, who we're talking to about city business doesn't violate any Brown Act with the quorum rule. Things such as emails, texts, phone calls, all of those are considered a communication and has to happen if there's a quorum at a public meeting. A good rule of thumb is what we call the Brown Act buddy, and it basically assigns a certain topic to two members on an advisory body. And then those two members can discuss that topic offline and then at a full public meeting, kind of discuss what those two Brown Act buddies have discussed. And so at this time, I do want to take a pause. It's a lot of information in a very short amount of time. So if you guys have any questions, on the Brown Act, I'm happy to kind of take those now. Member Sudi.
So I just want to confirm, there are a lot of online community meetings that other organizations put together. Like 2.5 months ago, Deanna and I were on one, happened to be on one. I know Deanna you're not a member, but let's assume you were, and there were 2 or 3 other members there as well. That is not a problem, correct? Because it's an open community invitation, anybody can participate.
Correct. And you just, like I said, when it comes to those sort of events, you just want to make sure that you don't talk about city business that pertains to your committee.
Well, for example, there are meetings around housing that other organizations put together. So it will relate to what all of us are going to be more or less attached to or be discussing. So in that regard, I just want to make sure that as long as it's let's say it's a community, everybody is welcome to attend, that is not going to be an issue because it is those are housing meetings. They're not
correct. Correct. And that does sound appropriate. I don't see any of those meetings discussing certain details that are, strictly to Menlo Park or anything like that, but it's a good forum for ideas to be shared and things like that. So I don't think that would be an issue or a violation.
I don't see where I can raise my hand, so I'm just sort of jumping in. So do I just jump in? Because I don't see a hand.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify something that what the previous speaker just said. As a resident, I'm a little, how do I word this? I talk about my community all the time. And I talk about issues that affect my specific community or lack of what I feel has resources, equity, just basic needs in these communities, whether it's school, So joining a committee like this, it sounds like per the Brown Act, I can't have these conversations with my own community because I'm on this committee now.
No, no, no. You can definitely speak to anyone, but yeah, especially this committee. This committee is asking you, to go out, talk to your constituents, talk to your community, get their feedback. It's when you're dealing with a quorum of the committee. You wouldn't want.
Oh, okay. So this is specifically. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think though too. Then I'm glad we're having this. So thank you. If I tend to maybe connect with other people within this group that we can't together meet, is what you're saying.
Not in a quorum. And because you guys are a body of 14, 8 or more is a quorum.
8 or more.
Yes, ma'am.
So 3 can meet. And when I say not like a planned meeting, that just we talk, I think sometimes where there is situations for some communities is that we may relate to other issues more effectively than other people do. And our concerns and our challenges are going to be relatable more to us. And so I think that's the disparities that we historically always deal with in communities, segregated communities. And part of our robust outreach is the fact that we have to be able to really, our communities have to see faces that they can relate to in order to want to participate. And so, I mean, I've canvassed my community numerous times, and there's nothing more enjoyable to me than to meet an 80, 100-year-old woman or man, usually the women, that have lived in this community. And that's the joy I get, is connecting with them in that way. But it's also that one-on-one that is getting them involved. And that means sharing a lot of things, sometimes historically and currently.
Yes, and again, the Brown Act only affects the actual advisory body. Again, we encourage you to reach out to your community. Yes, definitely.
Great, thank you.
And then Christina, did you want to? No?
I just have, Sudi, I'm so sorry. Somehow you disabled my video. That's why you don't see me.
Okay, Calvin, if you can check Sudi's video.
No, it just says the host has stopped it. Okay. Okay, now it's fixed. Thank you.
So while we have this conversation about the Brown Act and talking with the community, we're going to get a little bit more into the role of the community and the fact that this community is specifically focused on outreach. And so maybe as we go on a little bit, City Clerk Judy and Deanna, maybe we can talk about, when it's not specifically about the outreach around the housing element, but it's actually about the housing strategy, how the members can think about that, because the housing strategy is a major part of the work, but it's not the focus of this specific committee.
Yes, thank you, Christine. I appreciate you letting us know that that's coming down. And I think that would definitely provide some clarification around that. And then Member Spalding, did you have a question?
Yes, not to keep us on this Brown Act issue any more than we have to, but I have a question. If I do feel the need to contact more than 8 members of the committee, the proper way to do it is through, I send the information to, I guess, City Clerk Judy, or?
You'll send it to Deanna. She's your staff liaison, and then she can distribute it to everyone, via email or however, is most efficient. But yeah, you can definitely get information to everyone. Just the proper channel would be to go through your liaison.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. Any other questions on Brown Act before we move on to the agenda section? All right. I will continue. All right, so next we will be discussing the agenda. And the agenda provides basic information to the public so they know what will be discussed, when it's being discussed, and where it's being discussed. The agenda is typically set by the chair and the staff liaison. For regular meetings, the agenda has to be posted a minimum of 72 hours in advance of the meeting. And for special meetings, the agenda has to be posted at minimum 24 hours in advance of the meeting. On the agenda, you have to provide the time and location of the meeting and a general description of each agendized item. And at no time can items that are not on the agenda be discussed by any advisory body or any legislative body, so city councils or advisory bodies. So for meeting basics, you do have to establish a quorum before you can call the meeting to order. And so for this advisory body being a body of 14, again, you'd need a minimum of 8 members to call the meeting to order. Then there is the oral communication section. So the public has a right to speak on items that are on the agenda, and the commissioners or committee members are not allowed to respond to public comment. However, the chair can request that staff respond. And again, this is just because of this is based on Robert's Rules of Order and the Brown Act. Again, so if a member of the public has a question or something like that, the chair can direct staff to respond to the question. And then finally, the last meeting basic is you do have to officially adjourn a meeting. So that does conclude the agenda section. Is there any questions on that before we move on to Robert's Rules of Order? Seeing none, I will continue. So Robert's Rules of Order sets out the parliamentary rules and guide for establishing the conduct of the organization and the management of its meetings. The announcement of the agenda items, you must clearly state the agenda item number and subject. For any section of the agenda that contains reports and recommendations, this is when the relevant speaker can provide updates or recommendations. There is also the question and answer. Members can ask staff questions or receive clarification on any agendized item. And lastly is, again, public comment. The chair must recognize and allow public comment at the start of each agenda item. So typically what will happen, the chair will announce the agenda item number, the agenda item. Staff may or may not have a presentation, and then it's generally at that time we would call for public comment on that item. Next is member discussion. This is where members who have questions or comments on an agenda topic currently being heard must be recognized by the chair before speaking. As the chair, all members of the advisory body must be given the opportunity to comment or ask questions. For actionable agenda items, at the conclusion of the agenda item discussion, the chair will call for a formal motion. And once that motion is recognized by the chair will call for a second to the motion. Now with the second, you do not need to be a yes vote. You can second a motion and still vote no. And then lastly, if there's no friendly amendments to the motion or any clarification, the staff liaison will perform a roll call vote and announce the results of the vote. And that does conclude my Robert's Rules of Order rundown. And this would be the conclusion of my entire presentation. But again, if any members have questions, I'm more than happy to respond to them now. I know I've inundated you all with emails, so you have my email. If something comes up later, always feel free to reach out.
So quick question on actionable items. What is an example of a substitution?
A substitution?
Yeah, clarification, the other items, amendments, that's clear, but what would a substitution be?
So we offer what we call friendly amendments to a motion. A motion may be to, accept the meeting minutes of the last meeting, and the friendly amendment would be, updating a name change. Maybe there was a misspelling. So that would be a friendly amendment. There's also the opportunity for clarification after a motion has been made and seconded. That is the last opportunity for the committee to, either get more clarification on the motion or on the item itself before it's voted on. Did that?
Well, one of the items said substitution. Is that replacing some component, or did I misread that?
I think what happens if in the motion process, there'll be a debate about the motion on the table. There may be people on the committee who are in disagreement or have amendments that haven't been accepted. And oftentimes, legally, what you can do in Robert's rules is say, I'd like to put a substitute motion. And you need a second. And then you have to take that before the other motion, but you have to have a second to do that. And that's the process. Usually you try to get through the amendment and just have the motion hold what you want, but there is the ability to come in and have a replacement amendment and try to get people to vote, but you have to vote on it right away. You have to, the idea of replacing it,
Okay,
it
so
goes first.
you have to clear the substitution before you can then go back to the original amendment or whatever it was in the discussion.
Yeah, well, once you replace it, the other one's pretty much out the door, right? If you get approval for it.
Yeah. All right, got it. Thanks.
Thank you, Rich. I really appreciate that.
Yep.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, do we want to take public comment on this item, Deanna?
That would be great. So if any members of the public would like to speak on item D2 pertaining to committee training, please raise your hand feature at the bottom of your screen and we can unmute you. And if you are calling in by phone and would like to provide a comment, I believe Judy's gonna have to help me. You hit *9. Thank you, Calvin. All right, I don't, Cal, do you see anybody who would like to speak on this item?
No raised hands at this moment.
Great. Are there any additional comments or questions for City Clerk Karen? All right, if not, we can move to the second portion of item D2. Thanks, Judy.
Again, thank you all. I appreciate your service to the city. And again, feel free to reach out to me if there's anything I can assist with, need questions, clarification, always here to help, guys. Thank you again.
Great. So Christina, if you can share your screen, we'll go through overview of the roles and responsibilities and ground rules, which were provided to you in your packet this evening. So great. So as Judy mentioned, the CEOC is a Brown Act body. It's an advisory body that was created and formed by the City Council and your members that were appointed by the City Council. And the primary purpose of the CEOC is to assist the city in ensuring a broad and inclusive community outreach and engagement process for the housing element update. As a committee member, your primary responsibilities would be to serve as an ambassador of the project and encourage people to participate, to help guide and provide feedback on the community engagement plan, which we'll be reviewing later this evening, and to serve as a resource to provide information to and receive input from community on matters related to community engagement and public outreach. So you are our experts. So as community members, you know how to reach your friends, your neighbors, you know what types of communication works best. And so we are looking to you to serve as not only ambassadors, but as resources to city staff and help build this community outreach plan for a successful process. Next slide. As individual members, so that was sort of the group responsibilities, individual members, we ask that you identify effective ways to inform and engage the various stakeholders about this project, to commit to constructive dialogue and mutual respect and collaboration, and again, to share your local knowledge. And then finally, a little bit about our meeting protocols. I know we're all here to better serve our community. And with this COC, we ask members to do their homework, prepare and attend our meetings. We will prepare or provide our agenda packets to you no later than 72 hours so that you are able to review the materials, to seek and be open to creative and bold ways to meet multiple needs, to always maintain civil and respectful discourse, and to respect differing viewpoints. And I think that's why you're all here, is because there are many different viewpoints and we want to be able to hear from all of you and to represent different voices in our community. And to be attentive when others speak and ask questions to aid in clarification and mutual understanding. And that goes to, verify assumptions, don't make assumptions, and avoid assuming motives, and to stay focused on tasks. We know we have a lot to cover, so stay focused on task and share discussion time. And if you're unable to attend, we know that, we're all, you're all very busy. And so, but if you are unable to attend, please let us know 72 hours in advance. And all of these meeting protocols are all really to help promote efficient and collaborative communication, to build consensus, and to be fair and civil with one another. So with that, we'll take a pause and so we'll go through a little bit of meeting logistics quickly. So we intend to have meetings monthly. Thursdays, I think, are the days that work best so that it generally does not conflict with an existing other city commission or committee meetings. We're looking to have 2-hour meetings beginning at 6 and trying really hard to end by 8 p.m. So we want to have manageable agenda items. And our next meetings, we can circle back to this at the end of the meeting, but start looking at your calendars to see what dates work. The staff report identified potentially June 17th as the next meeting date, but we think June 10th would work better in schedules. And then looking to do a follow-up meeting in July 8th. As we get more into the presentation later this evening about our upcoming engagement activities, it'll be helpful for the CEOC to meet to help guide us plan for our upcoming efforts. It's going to be quite an intensive summer, leading to a number of work products. And so having us be able to meet monthly will be helpful in this process. So we'll circle back to the next meeting date later on at the end of this meeting. So any clarifying questions or thoughts? And then we'll go to public comment if there's anything on this particular item. Oh, yes. Member DeSiena.
So with the city slowly reopening, is there a chance that we might be meeting in person for these meetings eventually?
Potentially, that is a possibility. We are currently closed. All of our commission and committee members are being conducted virtually, but as we start to reopen to the public, that could be a potential where we do meet in person, or we may be in a hybrid format. That's still to be determined. Yes, Member Feldman.
Hi, I was just wondering if there was any flexibility around the 6 to 8 scheduling for the meetings. Obviously, I can make that time work, but for folks with kids, it could be a hard time. So I don't know if that's an issue for other folks.
I think we have some flexibility on schedules. We can circle back to that later. I know there's never going to probably be a perfect time, but we can circle back if that seems to, if others have a similar concern about the 6 to 8 timeframe. I guess, what time were you thinking?
Perhaps later, but I would want to hear from other folks. If I'm the only one, then I can make it work.
Sure, thanks. Okay, so let's say I think we had Member Tronson, maybe Christina, did you have something before we go to our committee members?
It was just a very quick comment that even if the city may actually officially open, to be respectful that different people have different caution levels. And even if we do meet in person, that we make the virtual attendance is still possible.
Thank you for that feedback. Yes, hybrid may be a consideration. Thank you. Christina?
Thanks. I just wanted to note that Member Feldman's point is a really good one, and that it would be great to check in on not only the start time, but also the end time, because we have so much to tell you, even just in this first meeting, that we may well run out of time. And I know that also for people with kids, it's tough to go past 8 because you start to run into bedtime and that kind of thing. So it would be great to hear how people feel about the time frame, you know, if it's okay to go over by 15 minutes or half an hour, you know, if it would be good to like check in at 8 o'clock if folks just really have to get off, or how we can, you know, help to work this into your lives. Because we really do want to hear from you, and it's tough, we know.
Yes, thanks. Thank you, Christina. Member Klein?
Yeah, just wanted to ask the question about the community engagement meetings. I remember there was that was a ton of work previously. How are these meetings going to be conducted with, you know, the current environment, even if we start moving away from, you know, absolute restrictions? How are we going to do, you know, these broader level community meetings? Is it just going to be this way, using this venue?
In the near term, virtual is the format. As we start to reopen, you know, from a city perspective, like how is our city council meetings, planning commission meetings, housing commission meetings, you know, as we start to reevaluate city hall opening up, I think there are other options that we can look at. I think when we go through our engagement plan, there will be different opportunities for people, different ways for members of the community to engage. So there could be surveys, which does not involve any, you know, do it at your own time. There will be videos, which could be, you know, learning opportunities at your own pace, own time, own schedule. Broader meetings virtually, you know, if we do open back up, you know, how do we make it safe for folks to participate in person or maybe in a hybrid format? So we're talking about maybe a gallery walk, you know, and the library is one of our first services looking to reopen. And so finding a safe space, you know, a place for that to occur. So we can talk a little bit more about that and hear from members of the committee to see what types of options or engagement activities are appropriate given the circumstances, or, you know, given members in the community what they might be looking for.
Will there be required attendance for some of these other meetings that aren't the actual committee meetings by committee members?
No, there's no, we are encouraging you to attend our other events, but there's no, the CEOC meetings are the ones that we ask for your attendance. The other meetings are optional, but certainly encouraged, yes.
Just wanted to ask it.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, why don't we go ahead, Cal, if you want to see if any members of the public have a question before we wrap up and move on to item D3.
Sure, if there's any members of the public at this time that would like to provide a public comment on this item, please press the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen if you're joining by computer, and if you're joining us by phone this evening, please press *9. Okay, we have no hands raised for this item.
Great, thanks. We'll move on to item D3, so selection of chair and vice chair for the CEOC. So the chair and vice chair serve an important role for the committee, helping to help prepare the agenda and also to help ensure an orderly and productive and efficient meeting. So we're certainly here to help the chair and vice chair manage the meeting, but it would be the primary responsibility of the chair to, as the duties of that Ms. Heron described earlier this evening. So if there's no questions, we can take nominations for the chair at this time. But feel free to ask questions if there's. Yes. Member Alavia.
I nominate Max.
Great. Thank you. So we have a nomination for Member Fennell. Member Feldman.
I was going to nominate Yadira.
Great.
I guess they have some input whether they want to do it or not, right?
All right.
So
Before we
like
get
putting them
to,
on the spots.
we get to Member Fennell, why don't we go? I think Member Feldman had her hand raised.
Right, I was gonna nominate either Yadira or Vicky. If either of you are interested, I think having one of you as chair would be great.
Great. So a
I
nomination.
decline right now.
Okay.
But thank you.
All right. Member Fennell.
I was going to nominate Nahizi for one of those positions.
Okay. For chair, we're taking nominations for chair.
Oh, okay. I was thinking chair or vice chair. So I'll go with chair.
Okay. Wonderful. Any other nominations for chair of the CEOC? Okay, great. We'll go ahead and take a vote. I will do them candidates in the order that we received them. And so why don't we do by, instead of a roll call vote, why don't we just do a show of hands? Oh, yes.
Oh, sorry. Thank you for the nomination, but I am transitioning back to work and I am part of another committee that I also participate. So I'm not sure if my work and my personal life would provide me a little bit more time to do the task that is required. I do apologize.
I think I'd probably want a little bit of a recap on what that role would be. As you said, right, putting the agenda together and setting up, I guess, reminders and time and dates, which you already have time and dates, correct?
Right. So the chair is, staff will put together a draft agenda and review it with the chair of the CEOC, and the primary responsibility is, attending the meetings and making sure that the meetings are running efficiently, going through the agenda items, call to order in terms of calling on public comment, seeking for clarifying questions, just making sure that we're staying on track and hearing from members of the committee as well as members of the public. A lot of procedural.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Member Spalding?
Yes, so I got a little bit lost. Can you recite the names of the people who have been nominated and accepted?
Sure. We have two candidates. So Member Fennell and Member Alarvia.
Yeah, thank you.
And can we still, since we had one turn down, can we nominate another person as well? Or are we limited to two?
No, we can nominate as many as you like. So if you have another recommendation.
Carol.
Okay, so.
Assuming she's up for it.
Well, I'm up for the committee, but I have not yet seen exactly what our role is. And so I don't really understand how much time would be involved. I need to understand where we are with the plan and how soon we can start to do our work, what's expected of us. So I think I'd be better off. I can run a meeting, but I think you want more than that. So I will thank you, Sudi, but I will decline for now.
Just to address that, so I will say much of the work that we are looking from the COC can be, I think, achieved during our meetings. There will be prep time before to prepare to come to our meetings and provide input. Certainly we welcome your attendance at our events and activities and promoting involvement in the COC, but much of the work and feedback that you'll be providing will be conducted at the CEOC meetings, which are anticipated to be once a month.
So it sounds as though the staff puts together the plan for outreach, and then the committee makes comments or additions or that sort of thing, but we don't actually put together the plan ourselves. Is that correct?
Yes, we will be presenting to you this evening a draft of the activities and events that we have outlined for our housing element update, and then we'll modify, we'll come back and convene, what worked, what didn't work, this is our next event, how might we prepare for that. So that's the feedback that we'll be looking for from this committee.
Well, in that case, I'll leave my name in nomination. Thank you, Sudi.
Okay, so then we have 3 nominations for chair. If there are no other nominations, we'll go ahead and we'll take a vote then. Okay, so the 3 candidates are Member Fennell, Member Alarvia, and Member Mayor Marshall. So first for chair, Member Fennell. If by raise of hand, let's see. I see 6 members, so I will. So Member Alarvia, Member Fennell, Member Spalding, Member Feldman, Member McMahon, Member Klein, and I see a 7th now, Member Roble. All right, next up, votes candidate Member Alarvia. Oh, my screen keeps changing. So I see, let's see, 3 votes for Member Alarvia. So Member DeSiena, Tronson, and Bortnick. Oh, Ms. Robledo, are you, I believe you voted for Mr. Fennell.
You vote for how many? I thought you did.
One chair.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry.
Okay.
Deanna?
Yes.
This is Jeff. Did you get Member Alavia's vote for Member Fennell? She did a virtual hand raise.
Let's see. Maybe.
Yes, I'm sorry. I raised my hand with the feature on Zoom.
Great, thank you. So,
Dina, I had meant to go for Lavia, but I didn't know her last name because I've been hearing Nazaria as the first name. So I think the first name is what I'm hearing, and not know.
okay. So, Member Robledo, was your vote for Mr. Fennell or Ms. Alarvia?
Oh, okay. No, I'm good. I wasn't sure. I wanted to clarify the last names because I'm seeing the first names and I didn't see that. I wasn't familiar. I'm supportive of both. So okay, I'll go for now.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Great. So I see 3 votes for Member Alarvia. So Bortnick, DeSiena, and Johnson. Thank you. And then final candidate, Member Mayor Marshall. Mr. Bortnick, I believe your hand is still raised. Thank you.
So this is getting, I'm so sorry, shouldn't be that complicated, but it is getting a little bit. So were we first voting for all for the chair and then the vice?
Yes, that's correct. Yes, this is just for the chair. We'll take nominations for vice chair and votes for vice chair following this.
Oh, okay. So I would then vote for Carol for I think because I already nominated for the chair. So that's what I was. So sorry for.
So I believe I had Member Johnson for Ms. Alarvia, so that is,
For the chair, yes. Okay, so then we move to vice chair afterwards, right?
yes, this is just for chair. So is
Yeah,
your vote
fine.
for chair for Ms. Alarvia?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. So perhaps, Mr. Chan, do you have all votes accounted for? I have 10, but I believe we have, is that?
I marked a total of 7. I didn't get all the votes for committee member Fennell, but I do have the 3 votes cast for committee member Alavia.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, by majority of vote, Member Fennell is our new chair of the CEOC. Welcome and congratulations.
Thank you.
Congrats.
So right now we will take nominations and do votes for vice chair of the CEOC. And this person will chair in the absence of Mr. Fennell.
I nominate member Carol Mayor Marshall.
I nominate Carol as well.
Okay, are there any other nominations for vice chair of the CEOC?
I nominate myself.
I was just going to nominate you, Lavaria. I'm not.
Oh, did I take it back?
Okay, yes, I was going to nominate. It's Olavia?
Yes.
Olavia. There's an O
Olavia,
there.
yes.
Okay, I nominate Olavia.
Great. So we have 2 nominations for member Mayor Marshall, a second nomination for member Alarvia. Do we have any other nominations for vice chair? Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and take the vote. So votes for member Mayor Marshall. And maybe if you use your virtual hand, it might be easier to see. So the virtual hand is in the lower bottom of your screen. And it says raise hand. Okay.
It seems like we have both real and virtual hands raised.
Okay, so for Mayor Marshall, we have Johnson, McMahon, okay, that's 2 votes for member Mayor Marshall, and now member Alarvia for vice chair. Can I see a raise of hands? Okay, so I see 7. Members Marshall and Alarvia, do you have a vote? Okay. Great. By unanimous vote, the vice chair of the CEOC is member Alarvia. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. So, Mr. Fennell, would you like to take over the duties of chair right now, or would you like me to continue?
I have the agenda here on my phone, but you can continue.
Okay, we can.
You got a good flow going on.
All right, thanks. All right. Thank you. Next up is item D4. So review and provide feedback on the draft community engagement and outreach plan. Oh, no, I'm sorry.
No, D3.
It's D3. Jumping in. So thank you. We're on item D3, presentation on housing element update overview. And here to present is Jeff Bradley from the M Group.
Thank you, Deanna. Before we get into this, I wanted to do a little activity here and ask the group, who already saw my presentation on Tuesday night in front of the city council? Anybody? 1, 2.
I might have caught some of it. So I'm not
Okay,
100%.
just a couple. So you guys are going to get subjected to the full package here.
Jeff, I'm so sorry. Would you be providing, because it wasn't in the packet, at least I didn't see it, your presentation?
Yes, we have lots of pictures. Christina, do you want to share your screen?
No, I meant like the hard, like a digital copy of it for us to review later.
I think is it posted online, Deanna?
We will post it. We will post the presentation online.
Sorry, I just had to turn off my fan in case it was making strange noises. So we're going to talk about this project that we're going to be working on together in terms of the community engagement. But we wanted, obviously, for this group to have a really good understanding of the project itself and what the effort is in terms of getting the word out and getting the community involved in an authentic a way that people feel good about. So first off, can everyone hear me okay on the audio? Good. Okay, so the short version that everyone hears about is the housing element. So obviously we're updating the housing element, but there's several other things that go along with that. And that includes possible amendments to the land use element, the zoning ordinance, and or specific rezonings of specific properties in order to make the housing element be approvable by the city council and by the state of California. Thirdly, we have an environmental justice element for the first time. This will be a brand new chapter of the city's general plan to address longstanding environmental justice issues within the community. We'll talk about that a little more later. Update the safety element. This is an existing chapter or element of the city's general plan. And there's a new law that requires us to address climate change and adaptation, which is really a great opportunity to bring in housing and adaptability and sustainability issues into this process. And overriding all of this and analyzing it all will be a very detailed fiscal impact analysis, looking at the possible fiscal impacts to the city and some of the other local government agencies, including local school districts, from adding more than 3,000 new homes to the city over the next 8 years. And finally, a very detailed environmental impact report to comply with state laws around environmental disclosure and protection of the environment. As a project team working with the city staff, we took our project goals to the city council on Tuesday night, and we didn't get any objections to them. So I'm hoping the council agrees with our 3 really high level goals for this project. And that's to create a balanced community. And what we mean by that is really intentionally and carefully plan for the whole community in a sustainable and healthy and balanced way. A real focus on affordability in terms of the housing element and the housing policies, given the extreme difficulty of developing enough affordable housing in the Bay Area and in San Mateo County and in Menlo Park. It's really ground zero for the affordable housing crisis to a large degree. And the overwhelming demand for affordable housing throughout the peninsula, including Menlo Park. And also work very diligently in a very deliberate and open way towards social justice, and work with the community to help ensure participation and access to the process, and take intentional steps that improve equity for historically marginalized people and areas. This slide is just a reminder that all these issues are intertwined. We can't talk about environmental justice without thinking and talking about housing justice and social justice and racial justice and economic justice. All these things come together. You can't have one without the other. The housing element itself is very highly regulated by the state, but there are opportunities for customization and making sure it fits local needs. The basic objectives that the state requirements are driving at are listed here. Increase the housing supply, obviously, with more homes, but also a mix of housing types. They shouldn't all just be one type or another. Promote infill development and socioeconomic equity. Promote improved jobs housing relationship within the region, meaning there should be a balance between low wage jobs and affordable housing and not a mixed match like we frequently see now throughout the Bay Area. And also balance disproportionate household income distributions. There should be more high income households in lower income areas and vice versa to create more equity, more diversity. And finally, under a new state law that's modeled under the 1968 Fair Housing Act is called Affirmatively Further Fair Housing, which we'll talk about in the next slide. So you'll see this acronym AFFH. And when I see that, I simplify it and say, well, that's fair housing. But the long title is Affirmatively Firm Fair Housing. This was a new state law back in 2018 where things were getting weird at the national level in terms of housing policy and enforcing and implementing fair housing laws. So the state took the proactive step of creating basically a California version of the Fair Housing Act. And it requires all state and local agencies to facilitate deliberate action to explicitly address, combat, and relieve disparities resulting from past patterns of segregation to foster more inclusive communities. Behind this image is a racial dot map created from the 2010 census data. And it clearly shows a pattern of settlement and housing and people living their lives in a segregated manner. Not just within Menlo Park, but throughout the entire Bay Area. The housing element itself is a very detailed document. We'll take a deep dive into existing housing needs, everything from overpayment to overcrowding, substandard housing conditions, the age of the housing stock. We'll look at projected housing needs. What's the total new housing we need? A lot of that is dictated by the state. They hand the number to ABAG, the Association of Bay Area Governments, ABAG and MTC, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. They finalize those numbers. Then each city and county in the Bay Area has to do a plan based on it. Special needs housing allows us to look at special needs that people have, everything from seniors, people with disabilities, large households, female-headed households. These all receive specialized analysis within the housing element itself. The site inventory details where all this new housing will go exactly, the plan for it. The constraint sections requires the jurisdiction to very carefully identify any constraint to the construction of housing, both market rate and affordable. And then you have to have a plan to overcome those constraints. And then the program requirements are very detailed. You can't just say, encourage more affordable housing. That's not going to cut it. You have to have a detailed implementation schedule of when you're going to do it. You have to have a detailed steps to take to make it feasible to build out enough housing at the different income levels that the state requires. We're in what's called the sixth cycle of this housing process, going back to 1969. We're now doing 8-year cycles. So this plan will go from 2023 to 2031. And there's several new requirements, including a much stronger focus on fair housing, diversity, equity, and inclusion, much higher total regional housing need numbers. They've increased almost 250% from the previous cycle. Expanded state oversight on the methodology and allocations. In other words, where the housing is required to go. And new, more strict requirements for identifying the eligible sites for the new housing. So these are some of the numbers you may have seen in the media accounts. The fifth cycle, which we're living in now, it doesn't end until 2023, had a RENA of about 188,000. That was all the new housing that was supposed to be built in the 8-year period, ending in 2023 throughout the entire Bay Area. For the sixth cycle, they've increased it about 245% to over 440,000 units. So a significant increase in the RENA. This is the highest RENA number ever required by the state and distributed by the Association of Bay Area Governments. Drilling down to the county level. So this is all the cities in San Mateo County plus the city. This time, the current cycle we're in right now was only 16,000. That jumped up to 47,000. For Menlo Park, we had less than 700 units to plan for previously. Now we're planning for almost 3,000. And in fact, the state requires you provide a buffer on this number. They actually want you to build this number. So what they require is you have to actually plan for 15 to 30% more than that. So now we're talking 3,400 to 3,800 units. For comparison purposes, just looking around the county, town of Colma, small town, not a lot of alive people there. Their arena is only 202. San Mateo, the largest city in the county, their arena is over 7,000. The average of all jurisdictions, including the unincorporated area, is just under 2,300. So it kind of puts Menlo Park's number in context. It's higher than the average, but not substantially so. Any question about the arena before we get into the more detailed information?
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
I can't put my hand up. I don't know how to do that, but go, you could go if you want.
no, go
Or I
ahead,
can go.
Victoria. I'll go second. It's Carol. You go first.
Okay, I just had a question regarding on the major building blocks when you refer to special needs.
Yes.
You know, I've worked a lot with the homeless population, and special needs can be those with extremely mental health issues. Is that something that is being considered in terms of, I don't know if that fits into that category of special needs, and is the city, or, I mean, I don't know how to look at that.
Yes.
Because I think that is something that we lack a lot.
Yes. The short answer is, the short and the long answer is yes. That is definitely, that's definitely part of it.
Okay, this is Carol, Mayor Marshall. I have two questions. The first is, of the 655 that Menlo Park was to obtain or put up in the fifth cycle, how many new housing units were in fact put up so far?
Yeah, that's the interesting bit. So the information we have is, it cuts off at 2020. And at that point, with 2 more years left in the cycle, the city had met all of its, from a total number requirement, they had way exceeded the 655, but most of that was market rate housing. And they had less progress within the lower income categories.
Okay, and my second question is, how does the state come up with these numbers? And do they just give you an overall number, or do they divide it into different income levels or types of housing?
No, absolutely. The state State Department of Housing works with the State Department of Finance, and they do all sorts of projections based on job growth, expected job growth, infrastructure, expected in migration from other places into California, the natural birth rate increases, and they generate these numbers. They've been criticized in the past for generating numbers that were too low. So I think this time they tried to compensate somewhat and kind of aim for a higher number. And it is broken down by income category, like you said. And we'll get to that in the couple of slides for Menlo Park. But the big number that comes from the state, it is in 4 different buckets of income categories. But then ABAG, which is our regional government, Association of Area Governments, which is really a collection, a representation of all the regular city and county governments who make up ABAG. They then have the task of distributing that big number to all of the member governments within the region. And that's the 9 counties that are touching the Bay is the region we're talking about.
But in the last 8 years, well, 6 years, I suppose we've been through, our population of Menlo Park and of these other cities as well has not grown by anywhere near the percentage of increase that the state has allotted. So I just don't, it sounds, I don't quite understand how the state went about the large increase.
A lot of it, Member Marshall, is related not necessarily to how much the city has grown in population, but how much the city has grown in terms of job creation. Because the state really sees new jobs as the root cause of the need for more housing, which
Okay, thank you.
makes sense, right? So,
Um,
and Menlo Park has done a
Because you're absolutely right, and I had forgotten about that. Okay, thank you for that information. I appreciate it.
sure thing. So I just want to pause there, try to do that every few slides so everyone has a chance to ask questions.
Jeff, we still have a couple of hands up.
Oh, okay. There's Dan.
Yeah. So a couple of quick questions about AAFH specifically. One is, does the law anticipate unintended consequences by coming up with a set of rules or directives about housing? Oftentimes there's other forces then that can change how that market works so that you don't achieve what you want to achieve. You achieve a different set of goals. I guess another way of asking that is there an enforcement or a prod that the state uses from this law to push communities to achieve the goals, whatever they are, 655, 2946, or whatever?
The affirmatively furthering fair housing law is relatively new for California. And so I can't speak too much about the enforceability of it. But in terms of the housing element body of law, it's really just a whole collection of laws. And every year there's more laws added to that. That is very enforceable. Two or three cycles ago, we would say, oh, well, you just have to plan for this housing. You don't have to actually build it. That's not true. That's not true anymore. Now cities are being judged by the state by how much housing they built through their annual progress reports every year. And cities that fall behind on their production are opened up to not just the normal potential for legal challenge from people who are unhappy with housing policy. To a large degree, having a certified housing policy inoculates you as a city from legal challenges in that regard. But with the new laws, you may have heard about some of the projects where if a city hasn't built enough affordable housing, then that means developers can come in, look at a piece of property, see what it's zoned for, and they basically have a by right path, meaning there's no discretionary decision making by the Planning Commission or City Council. They have a by right path to develop that property at pretty close to the highest density that is allowed by the city zoning and the city general plan. And the shorthand for that is SB 35 projects, because those are the projects that were enabled by that law that was passed a few years ago. And the poster child for that law in the South Bay is the Valco project in Cupertino, where the property owner struggled to go through a normal planning path to get a large project approved. Then when SB 35 came out, developer pulled that lever and allowed that project to get approved because the city was on that list of cities that hadn't built enough affordable housing.
All right, and I'm sorry, but I have one last one, and if this is not germane, just say so. There's 5-year mini census, and we have an upcoming census. Is there any preliminary data that we can see? Are we moving the trend appropriately in terms of new housing from 655 to 2946, regardless of what the basis of that is? Is there intermediate data, or is it just each census every 10 years we get the new shot?
No, there's also the 5-year American Community Survey, which is sort of a mini census. It's the official census people doing it, but it's on that 5-year pattern that will provide a more updated information for the housing element than the 2010 census, which is really that's not really good information at this point.
Yep.
And maybe the 220 census was, maybe that's not fully developed yet, and so we may have to rely on the 5-year data.
Okay, great.
Thanks,
and I'm sorry if I can add, there are a couple of different things there. There's the census and then there's the housing production. So the census data for this 2020 census is still really raw and is starting to roll out, but it's hard to use still. But the city also issues an annual report on housing production. So that happens every year, where the city issues a report on how many affordable units get produced and at what level of affordability. So we have really good visibility into that.
Yeah, great. And I agree the 2020 data is still a mess.
Member Tronson, you've had your hand up for a little while.
Thank you, Jeff. I apologize if you're going to be talking about this in the future slides, but I haven't seen them, so I'm going to ask them as the questions come up. One is, has there been a post-mortem done for the fifth cycle to see what were the obstacles, why the affordable housing didn't meet the targeted numbers? Because unless we can meet for the smaller number, there's no way we're going to meet it for the other ones unless we know what the causes were.
Absolutely. That is actually part of the work plan. Part of the requirements for the new housing element is to evaluate what worked and what didn't work under the previous housing element, which is exactly like you said, is like a post-mortem.
Okay. Then the other question is kind of more anecdotal. Just want to know if the city of Menlo Park has observed this, kind of related to SB 35, but not quite, in that there are reports in many different cities where private equity firms are buying up private properties. And then, so it's sort of like an average person buying a house is some equity firm doing that. Has that been reported in Menlo Park, and what information do you have, and how can we get that information down the line? Just again, you may not have the answer now, but that's something, again, the question of availability of land and housing can be reduced by a lot of different strategies from a lot of different people and entities. I just want to bring that up, that right now there are reports of that, and even for Menlo Park, that some companies are actually encouraging private homes to offer them as Airbnb kind of a thing for their visitors, what have you, and they kind of lock them up, and they're not available to average home buyer or tenant or whatever it might be.
Anything that takes housing out of the usable stock of the housing supply is definitely appropriate to analyze as part of the housing element.
So do you have access to that information, or should we get that kind of information? Or
typically cities have pretty good access to the assessors, the county assessors information, and that can indicate patterns of ownership as well as a renter versus ownership of property. That is definitely something we would want to look into if it's an item of community concern.
Thank you, Jeff.
Sure thing.
And I think finally, Member Robledo.
Thank you. When I see almost 3,000, you're saying that it's potentially possible it's going to go beyond, it's like 3,400.
38.
And you said that was also based on jobs. When I look at that, the biggest, well, Facebook, and yet Facebook is providing $1,500 housing for their, I don't know, employees anymore, or how that works at this point anymore. Is that included in that? I doubt it, but at the same time, the other question is Colma and Menlo Park. What's the population between those two cities? Because when I see 202, then I see 29. That's a big difference. And I don't know that Colma is much bigger than Menlo Park. I'm just curious on that one too. But again, more so on, it says that that large number for Menlo Park is based on companies and employment, where I see that there's not a lot of employment available in Menlo Park. Opportunities.
Yeah, a lot of the existing housing that you see in the community that may have been approved and built within the last 3 or 4 years, depending on exactly when it gets built, some of that will count towards this next cycle. So the city is getting some credit for that, so to speak.
But those are not they're not below market, that's for sure, because I think it's 200, or I'm not exactly sure the number that Gray Star is building over here in Belhaven. That is not affordable housing. So again, that's where we run into that situation of segregated housing. And how do we mix communities if we're constantly building homes that diverse communities can't even purchase?
Correct. It is a major challenge.
If I could just add just a quick note regarding the current housing that is being, that's pending. So there are a number of housing units over 3,000 that are pending in the city right now. And the city does have a below market rate housing program. So it is required at a minimum to provide 15% of that housing stock as affordable to low income equivalent for rental housing or moderate for sale housing. But you're right, Member Robledo, it doesn't meet the need of the community. There are definitely different income categories that I think Jeff might review that are required as part of our demonstration for meeting our RENA allocation. So we're going to have to find ways to create more affordable housing, but the city currently has an inclusionary zoning policy, which requires 15% of the housing to be.
Thank you. One last thing, if I can, is I last time I saw, I think low income was considered 95,000.
Yeah, we're gonna get into that. I think the next slide.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You beat me to it.
Sorry about that. Good segue.
No, good segue. Good segue. Thank you. So this is the chart of the income categories. It's extremely more complicated than this because it has 5 categories. I didn't show the above moderate income category. That's basically anything above the 179,000 there. Each category has different numbers based on household size, from 1 person to eight people. But I wanted to reinforce the idea that when we talk about income categories, we shouldn't use that as a label on people, because these are people who are working hard in the community, or seniors living alone on a fixed income, essential workers, nurses, teachers, tech workers. These are the people that make our society work. And because San Mateo County is such a high income area, and all of these income limits shown here are simply percentages of the average income in the county, the average median, the area median income in the county. You see these very high numbers that in almost any other part of the state would be considered not very low income or not low income. There's low income category for a 3-person household is over $130,000. That's a good solid income. And so I just want to reinforce that sometimes these labels get thrown around as if it's like a disparagement, but these are real people that the plan has to help find suitable housing solutions in the community. Any questions about this slide or comments?
I have a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
Does that also include any partnerships with the local universities or colleges?
Can you elaborate a little bit? Just like
yeah. For example, I know that they're building housing unit off of El Camino, which I think is a border of Menlo Park and Palo Alto. So I was just wondering, since it's, I believe it might be in the Menlo Park side, does that also include, and from what I've heard here in the community is that it's Stanford housing. And with the city involved. So our colleges also providing housing within the city for their students and staff. And is that information part of the previous slide as far as why the numbers are increasing?
Sure. It's an interesting question because we're also working on the Stanford Community Plan for Santa Clara County, where we're dealing with that exact issue of how much housing the university should provide, not just for its students, but also for its faculty and its staff. And so part of it counts, like the housing generally that's built for faculty and staff counts towards the housing requirements from the state, because they're essentially normal housing units, whether they're apartments or condos or houses. But the student housing, the picture gets a little more complicated, because if we're just looking at a traditional dormitory with dorm rooms, those are not considered housing units. It's a form of group housing. And so it's kind of in a, it doesn't impact these housing numbers. But the housing that's needed for faculty and staff and other workers, that would definitely be part of this. Thank you. Any other hands up?
Yeah, Member Tronson.
This may not be directly relevant, but I remember a couple of years ago, at least, there was a whole issue around Stanford University not paying its proper taxes for basis for school and a whole bunch of other things. So if the housing that is provided to their staff is going to be counted against what is required, let's say for Menlo Park to build for other non-Stanforders, is that, I don't know, that just doesn't seem right to me. And is that true still, that Stanford doesn't necessarily support Menlo Park in the same way that it would if it were paying something? Maybe things have changed since I read it 2 years ago, and I'm wondering what's your opinion?
No, yeah, but that's something we've spent a lot of time on, and the university is a tax exempt organization, so everything you would think of as Stanford lands doesn't have to pay taxes unless it's being used for a non-academic purpose, like the shopping center or the research park, even the faculty staff subdivision within campus, which is occupied by long-term leaseholders. They pay property taxes. And so it's a complicated picture. And sometimes when they go off of that property and purchase properties elsewhere, legally, they can claim a property tax exemption if the housing in this example is being used, directly in support of their mission of teaching and research. But if it's something else, then the tax exemption may not apply. If it's like a commercial building or something that's been leased out to a private party to do something different. But yeah, that's an issue we heard about loud and clear working on the general use permit from 2018 to 2019. We had meetings in Menlo Park and Palo Alto and East Palo Alto, and we got an earful exactly what you're talking about. And it continues to be an issue that the county is trying to work on.
So I guess then the next question becomes, is that something that the city of Menlo Park is actively trying to address by either saying, okay, if they're gonna build, I don't know, I'm just making it up, Stanford is building 10,000 units, that we should not be using them to count against what Menlo Park should be providing. So I mean, there's some things that we don't have the power as a city compared to the state, right? They cannot change the tax exempt status of Stanford.
Yeah.
But other ways, so that otherwise, we won't build anything. If what they count or build for their staff and faculty could be counted against what Menlo Park should be building otherwise for regular people who need housing.
Right. That's kind of that gets to the core of the debate about how much of the housing should be built on the campus versus how much should be allowed or encouraged or not allowed or encouraged to be built off the campus. And it's yet to.
And is there a zoning thing? What does the city itself has power over the zoning of that?
For those portions that are within Menlo Park city
Outside
limits.
the campus. Those
No.
units that would be off campus. That would be like in Menlo Park, but not at the university campus.
No, the campus itself is under the county Santa Clara County jurisdiction. Different county, not in Palo Alto, subject to county government rules.
The property on El Camino Real has been negotiated in a development agreement so that Stanford has to pay multi-million dollars to impact fees for education, impacts fees for schools, and development, traffic, and then there's an allocation of housing they have to do for affordable housing, even though they're going to do staff. They still have to do affordable housing for some community members, but I forget the percentage. Yeah. But because it is mostly for staff.
Right, because one of the things that I keep reading a lot of times, but that's a separate again. I'm so sorry, I will say this one last one, is the in lieu payments, for example, or how much some developer, be it Stanford or somebody else, is going to pay. And most of the times those in lieu payments, if this is kind of like an in lieu payment, never comes close to the value that you lose in terms of what you can offer in terms of affordable housing. So it would be great to have some insight in some of those calculations down the line. Not tonight.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson, Member Johnson. And I want to note for all of us that there are going to be a lot more conversations to come on all of the ins and outs of housing policy and how does it all work and so on. I want to recognize that Chair Fennell has had his hand up for a little while.
I was just wondering, how did you get the income categories? You might have said it, but how did you guys come to these categories?
I honestly, I Googled it, and every year in about March or April, the State Department of HCD that we've talked about a lot, that's in charge of this housing element process, they publish annual income limits for every county in the state. And those become the official income levels that are used for planning for housing affordability.
Who publishes it again?
The acronym is HCD, but it's the State Department of Housing and Community Development. And if you Google, we could email it out too, but if you Google 2021 HCD income limits, it should be the first thing that comes up.
Got it. Thanks.
It was just published last month, I think, April.
Thanks, and Member Klein.
I didn't have a question. I just left it up there because I forgot I had a hand up there. Sorry.
No problem.
Okay.
So thanks, Christina. And Jeff, before you jump in, I know we have a number of other things to cover this evening. I just wanted to do also a time check in recognition that we are approaching 8 o'clock and we want to be respectful of your time, but I know we have probably the meat of our conversation to come, which is the housing, the engagement and outreach plan. So I wanted to just do a check-in with the group here. I know we're having a great conversation, but wanted to see if folks can stay on longer than 8 o'clock so we can complete our agenda this evening. Thumbs up. Okay, well, and if you do have to.
Deanna, I actually, while we were talking about this, I made a poll for this. We want to do it. Did we feel like we got a clear response? I wasn't entirely clear.
Okay, why don't we can do your quick poll. I'm not, some are on phone.
What's your estimate of how much longer?
Good question.
I anticipate it may be another hour.
Ooh,
that's hard.
Would it be acceptable, because this is our first time and we have a lot of coming up to speed and that has to be absorbed, if the rest of the members on the 72-hour notice to take an extra meeting next week?
I would agree to that.
I would be agreeable to that.
Is that a full meeting or just an hour-long meeting?
So it would be the remain. I don't think we would add any new agenda items if we wanted to continue this to have, well, we can finish off the presentation and start with the engagement plan. But I think there's a couple of things. One, maybe do we want to take a vote on if we want to extend this meeting, and if it, or seek, if there is a date that works for everyone to continue this item. Christine, do you want to do your poll to see if?
Well, I don't have that specific question. I need a little bit more time. How about it is a significant chunk to get through. We have a presentation of the community outreach approach, and then we were planning to go through in a fair amount of detail the outreach plan that you guys got very recently, because we acknowledged that you were only appointed very recently. So maybe what the question is should we complete this presentation and then look for a relatively soon, like next week or 2 weeks from now, meeting time? Or then that would be a thumbs up. Or should we just keep going and power through this whole thing? And then you don't have to do thumbs up or hands up or anything. So who is in favor of trying to find a time 1 to 2 weeks from now?
I am as well.
The Zoom hand, if at all possible, it helps us to scan. This counts as Zoom, I guess. It's auto Zoom. All right, so I feel like that is a fairly clear majority of folks who want to get just through the end of this presentation. We may go like a couple of minutes over, but not 60 of them.
Right, and then we'll need, before we end this meeting, we will need to find another date that works. So please pull out your calendars and we'll get through the presentation first and then we'll find a date and time.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Deanna, for the time check. Good timing. And back to Jeff.
Thanks, you guys. So we covered income categories, and then we have the RHNA. This is the 6th cycle regional housing needs allocation for Menlo Park. So we talked about the almost 3,000 units RHNA. That's really, we need a strategy to plan a buffer, which jumps it up to 3,400 to 3,800. But sticking with this lower number of 2,946, this is how it breaks down. 44% of the units would be planned for above moderate income units. So those are essentially, those are market rate units. When you hear above moderate, think market rate. The next biggest category is very low income units, which is 740 units, or 25% of the total. By definition, very low income units are defined from people who have income from 0 to 50% of the median income in the county. By definition, that includes the extremely low income category that you may read about, that we have to plan for, but it doesn't get its own broken out RHNA number. But technically, it's the portion of very low income units between 0 and 30% of income. So it's a detail to keep in mind. And then the next biggest category is moderate income units at 17%, just under 500 units. This is the income category that actually the city currently is struggling to meet the RHNA in the most. The actual, and you could almost think of this as like the missing middle. There's very few programs target moderate income units, and developers prefer to build above moderate or market rate units, and affordable housing developers and portions of market rate housing projects are set aside for very low and low income units generally. So that moderate income unit category is a little tricky. And then finally, 14% of the units are considered low income units. When you hear that, and when we're talking about communication and talking to the public and talking to your neighbors, when we talk about lower income households or housing affordable to lower income households, that by definition includes these two categories that are labeled very low income and low income. Sometimes there's confusion about that. And so where's all this housing going to go? A lot of it, like we talked about, is represented by this pentagon in the middle. 5th cycle sites, so that's the existing housing element, sites that were identified back in 2015. If they didn't already develop, they could essentially be recycled as long as you do something to them from a policy perspective to make them more likely to develop this next time. So you have to increase the density. You have to make the planning process smoother and faster and more predictable. You also have pipeline projects that have been approved and may be under construction right now or over the next year. If those receive their certificate of occupancy or their final inspection anytime after June of next year, they can count towards the next housing cycle. And so that's going to, and like Deanna said, there's such a big pipeline of projects. A large number of them are going to be satisfied by that middle category, but we're going to see that we're falling short in some of the affordable income categories. So we have to get creative and look at, can we add more housing along El Camino in the downtown? Plan for older commercial sites to transition to mixed use or standalone housing. Look at additional housing opportunities in single family areas. The state has recently passed laws so almost every single family house can have a junior ADU, accessory dwelling unit, can have a regular ADU. And so now you're talking about 3 units on one property. ADUs themselves are a real bona fide way to provide what we consider naturally affordable housing, because the units are smaller. They're just, even someone who wants to maximize the rent, there's sort of a cap, just because it may be very small and not have its own presence on the street. And it's great for young people just starting out. It's good for older people looking for a smaller, more manageable house, and really everyone in between. Religious facilities, there's a new state law that allows churches and temples and synagogues to provide housing essentially within their large parking lots to serve their mission, and they don't have to replace that parking. So there's several strategies that can be evaluated here to kind of unlock some potential housing opportunities that would be distributed throughout the city and not overly impact any one area. So the housing element gets a lot of the airtime, but we're also talking about the environmental justice element. There's really an opportunity here to address longstanding environmental justice issues. And this is where we have disadvantaged communities of color, exposed to higher levels of pollution and lack of enforcement of environmental laws, exposure to high levels of diesel particulate from nearby roadways. There's an opportunity to promote public facilities within areas that have historically not had the same level of public facilities as other areas, provide healthy food, promote physical activity through parks and open space, and of course, provide safe and sanitary, affordable homes so people have a safe living environment. The safety element addresses through this targeted update will address climate change resiliency and adaptation, sea level rise, flooding hazards resulting from that, new increased fire danger from the warming climate we're experiencing, as well as other local hazards that may be identified through the process. This is the slide where we turn it over to Christina. Thank you, Christina.
Which is next week or something.
So this is a good time to pause, I think. Yes, Member DeSiena, and then we can open up to members of the public if they have any clarifying questions as well.
I just want to clarify, when you shared that there's housing being possibly either built or provided at a church parking lot, is that like the RVs that park in there, or is there actually like housing being built on those parking lots?
Under this new state law, it would encourage and allow actual housing to be built on some of these church religious facility sites.
Okay, thank you.
What it would allow is that the church parking can be reduced by up to 50% to allow for this new housing.
I'm a little confused. I didn't know church parking lots had that much space to build. So what are we talking about in terms of building?
Yeah, there's a variety of sites throughout Menlo Park. If you look at Menlo Church, they have a huge parking lot. There's a few other religious facilities that have some larger parking lots. There are some religious facilities with very small parking lots, and so it may not make a lot of sense for some of those, but one of the things that we can do is start reaching out to these religious organizations and see how open they are to considering housing in their parking lots.
Thank you.
Thank you. Member Robledo. You're on mute, Member Robledo.
First, I think it's great that they're considering putting some small apartment complexes in some of these parking lots, because we have one on Hamilton Avenue, one of the churches there, and it really helps with the elderly and just the low income. The other thing that I saw that was interesting is that when you see high income numbers about the units being built, I think it was 1,200. Then you see the low income, really low in terms of affordable. So it seems contradicting to the segregated living pattern. Because if we're trying to promote diversity in our communities and not do West Side and East Side, then where those housing is being placed and the numbers really continues to support segregated living patterns. And I think that's something that we really need to look at when we're placing the housing in the future.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
Right, and that will be part of community meetings that we will be having to discuss policy, some of these policy considerations that would go.
And that's why I joined this committee.
Yes, yeah, so, and again, this committee is focused on the engagement and outreach plan to help get the responses that we need to help find what sites, what policies, what programs. And so that's where your expertise comes in for this particular, we're not focused on the policy issues, although those are very important to creating the housing element.
Could I just ask one quick
Mayor
question? Jeff, you didn't mention, when is the housing element plan to be completed?
Oh, thank you. Yes, there's a hard deadline in January 2023. And as a result, we really need to be done by November or December 2022 to make sure we meet that deadline.
Okay, but there is some plan in writing now that we as a committee can use if we're going out to engage the community. We have to be able to tell them at least what's planned so far. So what do we use?
Under the current housing plan?
Well, we don't want to use the old one, but is there a summary of the new one that we can use and tell people? I mean, we're engaged them in and want them to give you ideas that they may have, but we have to give them something to tell them,
That'll be a big focus of the community engagement is laying out the scenario and giving people a chance to respond. But we won't really have a draft plan until we've done a lot of community engagement. So we know what the issues are, what the special needs housings are, what are the unique challenges people are having in Menlo Park that we need to try to address. So we won't, and we can have an outline of sort of the major ingredients of the housing element, but we won't have real detailed strategies until we've done quite a bit of community outreach.
That you will have some paper that we can use to let people.
Oh yeah, we always bring lots of paper. Usually people complain we provide too much reading material.
Your government.
Virtual paper.
Your government people.
Yeah. Okay. Well, because we need something to be able to talk about,
Right. People like to react to something.
Yes.
Yeah. We'll provoke them a bit so we get a reaction.
Okay.
Great. Member Johnson.
Along those lines that Carol asked, if I may rely upon and draw upon my days as an engineer and doing experimental design, one of the things that is key is if we get the answer to the questions that we may pose to the public, will you get the answers that you need to have in order to implement your strategies and execute them? Because while open-ended questions are good, if they're not the right questions that are going to implement change, right, that are going to drive change, it won't be as good. And I'm sure you've thought about that, but that would be the kind of stuff that we would like to have in terms of what information would impact and drive your action. Not you personally, but the city in general. Those would be more meaningful questions to pose to the public.
Definitely.
I have a question. because I agree with the asking questions, but my issue is it seems like it's more than a question asking session. I think to actually have inclusive housing, you have to change, people have to change, minds have to change. So what's the plan for that part? I mean, this community has a history of redlining and all other issues. So I'm just wondering, how do we engage a community that has been okay with status quo for so long?
No,
If I may, me as a resident, I think that comes from the courage of the leadership, because the general public doesn't always agree with what is right. So I think some of those are political will and matters of policy. So I would put more, I agree with you 100%, but I would want to appeal to the good sense of our council and the city management to drive some of those changes more than probably the residents, because of exactly what you said.
Thank you. And if I may jump in, that is very much the focus of our community outreach outline. And since now we'll all get to sit with that for a little bit, a couple more days before we meet again. We'd love for you to look at that and think about whether or not you think that helps to solve that question. If there are more details that we need to put in there to make sure that we are doing this right. And the location of affordable housing is going to be a big focus of many of our conversations, and in fact is required. We are required to come up with an equitable plan for locating the affordable housing and the housing in general. And there were so many issues that came up that we will have to be teasing out over the next months, not only in these meetings, but also in other meetings that are related to the housing element and the environmental and the safety element and the environmental justice element.
Not to nitpick, but I imagine some people may have an issue with just the term affordable housing. It should just be housing.
agreed. Yeah, there's been some shifting towards terminology, including the term social housing, meaning housing serves a social purpose and everyone has to have it. But I agree that some of these terms become weaponized in the public debate, and so we need to be thoughtful, and we would appreciate you guys sharing your thoughts about really basic concepts, like the words we use to describe what we're trying to accomplish.
Yes, that's really important.
Thanks. So before we get to looking at our schedule, I just want to make sure if any members of the public have comments on this item that we hear from them. So Senior Planner Chan, if you can call for public comment.
If any member of the public has a comment, please press the raise hand button at the bottom of your computer screen. If you're joining us by phone, please press *9 and we will see your raise hand. Okay, we have no public comments at this time.
Great. So now we're going to be looking to see our next meeting so we can really dive into the material of the purpose of this group. So I think we were looking at targeting our next full meeting on the 10th, and that may give us opportunity to maybe even expand our agenda. But if we want to just focus on the next portion, which is reviewing the engagement plan, provide us feedback, we can limit the agenda as well. So typically we would like to target Thursdays to not conflict with other meetings that the city conducts. So is there, maybe we can take between the 3rd and the 10th are the 2 upcoming Thursdays that I think our team is available.
So Deanna, do you want people to vote for their favorite or up or down the 3rd?
So why don't we'll go up or down on the 3rd. So meeting of the 3rd. So I guess if you're,
I'm unavailable the 3rd.
If you are supportive of meeting on the 3rd,
yes,
put your hand your virtual hand up. So, and please leave your hands up so we can see.
I'm sorry, but I don't seem to have the usual chat or hand on my computer.
I think in some cases you might have to update your Zoom version. I think older versions of Zoom don't have the hand raised.
Yeah, I don't have it either.
I have it on other meetings, but I don't seem to have it on this meeting for some reason.
If you click the participant tab, it'll give you a list. And then at the bottom of that box that breaks out, there's some commands.
Mine just says invite.
Oh, it doesn't say mute me or raise hand?
No.
Yeah, mine just says invite too.
Oh, okay.
So just because I know that some members might not be able to make the 3rd, can you,
I'm voting
everybody put hands down. And then if you are able to make the 10th instead of the 3rd, can you put your hand back up?
Oh, instead of, well, I can make other one.
You could make, if you could also, and or if the 10th would potentially work for you.
Are we talking the same time?
Yes. I mean, it could be 6:30 or something.
6 o'clock would be great.
We just need to make sure that we have a quorum for each date. So if you can make both, please raise your hand for both.
Yeah, I got 8 for both, or even 9 for the 10th. So it seems like both could potentially work. And I believe there was one member who was not able to join today.
So we have 11 members here. So I think for the meeting of the 3rd, I think I had 9. I had members Spalding and McMahon, I think, who were unable to attend. And then for the meeting of the 10th, I'm sorry, I didn't capture everyone. If you can leave your hands raised if you're able to attend the meeting of the 10th. So that looks like everybody. I have that correct?
That's what I see.
All right, so and I know time was a question. So does 6 to 8, I heard yes for a 6, maybe a little bit later.
Oh, it's a full-on lengthy meeting. I thought it was just an added hour to this meeting. Okay.
Well, originally we had thought we would have a second meeting on the 10th and we would have new agenda items. So we might take this opportunity to combine some of the items that we had originally planned for on the 10th. We can review that with the chair, our agenda.
So let me just clarify, June 10th, we already had a meeting scheduled for June 10th, didn't we?
Yes.
Yes,
We were moving in that direction.
So this isn't, I thought what we were trying to set right now was finishing up this meeting by having just another short hour meeting next week.
Yes, we might be able to combine the two.
Okay, because I don't want to be in the
kind
same
of
situation.
for what Victoria is saying, I kind of prefer to handle the remaining of this meeting next week. And then, you know, at that point, we'll be all kind of acclimated to each other and do a fresh meeting on the 10th.
Yes.
I think the benefit to, you know, it's tough with this large of a group to schedule something a week out, and we want to make sure that as many folks as possible can attend. So if we wait until the 10th, my understanding is that we'll get 2 more members who are here now who would be able to join. And you know, that's a major benefit to meeting a little bit later. Does anybody have any thoughts about that?
Let's decide. It's coming on 8:30.
I actually thought it was only one member that it was only a 1 member difference, unless I didn't count properly. Sorry, I have a puppy.
So how long would the meeting on the 10th exactly be?
2 hours.
And so we'll just be getting the rest of this and then go on with the new meeting. So, I mean, if it's just going to be a standard 2 hours, we should just be fine for the 10th.
Thank you, Chair Fennell. Yes, the other agenda items that we were planning on covering we're getting a little bit more into selecting stakeholders and focus groups, different organizations that we should contact as part of our initial work, thinking a little bit about the community survey that we are going to put out. And there was one more thing that I am afraid is escaping my memory.
Looking at some of the environmental justice and safety element
and
meetings.
safety element meetings. Thank you, Deanna. So those are major outreach elements also that we need to.
What were the two major outreach?
So we need to do outreach not only on the housing element, but also on the safety element and the environmental justice elements of the general plan that will be updating alongside the housing element.
I would rather have two short meetings so that we sure that we have time to comment rather than one that might go 3 or 4 hours.
It would also be very helpful to have all the information, including Jeff's wonderful presentation ahead of time. Because we might have some of the answers hit, in the next slides. So we wouldn't be taking up so much time in questions necessarily.
Okay, so what I think I'm hearing from the group, the preference is to have 2 meetings with the hope of them being shorter.
Yes.
So a 1-hour meeting on the 3rd and then a 2-hour meeting, but not a 4-hour meeting on the 10th.
Yes.
Everyone in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Great.
So the 3rd
would be the consensus.
Wonderful.
So
So
1
we'll send-
hour on the 3rd at, should we say 6:30, since we don't need to go quite as late, and then we can allow a little bit more dinner time.
Okay, so I'm sorry, what time?
6:30.
6:30, does that help?
6:30.
I still have Member Feldman's, personal stuff that we all need to take care of in my mind.
6 is fine.
Okay. So 6 o'clock on the 3rd, and then for 1 hour-ish. And then
And 4th.
and then on the 10th, the same, 6 o'clock.
Okay.
And we will send out invites, and we have this PowerPoint all ready to share with you. So we will share this whole thing very shortly and begin working towards the 10th as well.
So what link or what, where do we get this information? What website do we use?
So Deanna, we'll send it out.
Yeah,
Deanna, go
so
ahead.
we'll similar, so it can come in both ways. So what we'll do is generally, you might have received multiple links to this meeting. So one, as a member, you'll get the city announcement that an agenda has been posted. I'll also reach out to the group with the agenda saying, hey, the agenda has been posted. And then as panelists, as members of the CEOC, you'll get your own link to the meeting. So I know some logged in with the agenda meeting, but we'll send out a separate.
I didn't mean the meeting, I meant to the material.
Yes, they'll be part of the agenda packet.
Okay.
So when you look, I know that some of us don't look at agendas every day. When you look at the agenda, there are links in there to each of the other materials. So there was a link to the various staff reports and so on for today in today's agenda.
Guess I missed it.
You only had it less, not a lot of notice.
Yes. And we can connect offline too if there are questions. Happy to help walk through the agenda and the materials.
Member Olivara, do you have something that you'd like to say?
No, that was by mistake.
Okay, well, so I think we have our next 2 meetings. We'll post our agenda. Thank you all for coming this evening. It's exciting to have this group work together to create a great engagement plan. Any final comments from Jeff or Christina or members of the group? Otherwise, we can end this meeting.
I'm excited that we have such a pretty good group thus far. And I'm looking forward to getting to work with everybody.
We really appreciate
Same
your,
here.
Have a good night,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone. Have a good
Thank
night.
you.
Have a
Good
nice
night.
evening.
Good to be with you.
Good night. Bye.
Bye.